Hello students, in our last lesson we learnt about the theory of objective correlative propounded by T.S. Eliot. We have seen there that by objective correlative he meant that the emotion of the poet is objectified in the form of an object, an image, a chain of events or a situation. That is, the subjective emotion of the poet is transformed and made objective and universal through this objective correlative. In continuation to this concept is his impersonal theory of poetry that we are going to look into briefly in our lesson today. This you will further read in detail in your criticism paper in his essay Tradition and Individual Talent. Here we are going to have a brief look at it. So the impersonal theory of poetry that Eliot elaborates in his essay Tradition and Individual Talent is, or it becomes, the basic tenet in the creative and critical ideology of T.S. Eliot, and it may be said to be the starting point and the fulcrum on which the critical ideas of T.S. Eliot move. It centers on a theory of poetry of which the directing principle is the ordering of the emotions and the personality of the poet for the purposes of his creative endeavor. So what two things that are important are the emotions experienced by the poet. So there should be a proper ordering of these emotions and the whole personality of the poet that needs to be changed, transformed in the process of this creative endeavor or in the process of this creativity. So Eliot's concept of an impersonal order of poetry, we see, stems from his organic view of literature. He believes that literature is a living whole of all that has been written in the past and all that is being written now. He even goes on to suggest that a poem should be looked upon as an organism with a life of its own, that is, a living organism. In the Tradition and Individual Talent, he elaborates on this theory of his, and according to him it has two different aspects. The first aspect is the relation of the poem to other poems by other authors. The second is the relation of the poem to its own author. As for the first, Eliot maintains that the poet is not an isolated individual living in an ivory tower that is completely cut off from life. Rather, he believes that the poet is a product of his age, and therefore he is part and parcel of the civilization of which his age forms an integral part. And that's why he is not an ineffectual angel beating in the void his luminous wings in vain like Shelley, as termed by Matthew Arnold. And the poet cannot be valued in isolation. This is what Eliot believes. On the contrary, the greatness of a poet can be judged in the proper perspective only against the interaction of the past and the present. That is, where the past and the present coexist. That is, any author can be judged as a great poet only when he is compared to the authors of the past as well as the authors of his own age. That is, the dead poets as well as the living poets. He needs to be compared with or compared to. The second aspect of Eliot's impersonal theory of poetry is the relation of the poem to its own author. So the poet in his creative endeavor is not concerned with the direct expression of his personality through his creations, but the personality of the poet is transformed completely during this creative process into something universal and impersonal. And this is the reason why Eliot calls, or Eliot says, that the greatest art should be, or it is, impersonal. The creation of a work of art, he feels, is not an outpouring of personality, but it is rather a concentration on the work to be done. The work to be done, according to Eliot, means for this there is needed a surrendering of the personality, the whole of the personality of the poet, including his imagination, his intelligence, his sensibility, for the purpose of this creative activity, so that in the process of creation, the whole of the author's life is transfused into the work of art. And he himself explains, within quotes, the more perfect the artist, the more completely separate in him will be the man who suffers and the mind which creates. The more perfectly will the mind digest and transmute the passions which are its material. So the passions or the material, that is the passions or the emotions experienced by the poet, they are perfectly transmuted into something new when a work of art is created, and the mind meanwhile remains inert. So by this we infer that the impressions and experiences which are important for a man may take no place in poetry, and those which become important in his creative endeavor may play a negligible role in the life of the man or in his personality, since for the poet the emotions and the personality are merely the raw materials of poetry, which get transformed into a new and living form of art, the finished product which we call poetry. So the raw materials of poetry, emotion and personality of the poet, they are used not only with other experiences but also with words and phrases stored up in the poet's mind, until they can unite and form a new compound which is termed as poetry. It is in the process of fusion that the personal emotions are rendered impersonal, in the sense that what was before personal and subjective now becomes impersonal and objective. So Eliot elaborates this idea by giving an analogy of a catalyst. So the creative activity, he says, is analogous to a catalytic action, for the impressions and experiences, they combine together to form a new compound. Here, poetry. The new compound is poetry that the poet creates. So further, the mind of the poet is just like the shred of platinum that he says, refers to in this essay, although which this shred of platinum, though it accelerates the formation of the chemical compound, it itself remains inert, neutral and unchanged. This is what Eliot says. So similar is the role of the mind of the poet. The mind of the poet, which digests and transmutes the passions which are its material, is not engulfed, it is not subsumed by them, but in the process of fusion, in the formation of a new compound, that is poetry, the mind and the personality of the artist, they remain outside the process and they are not affected by it. So as a result of this fusion, what happens? A high concentrated or distilled emotion is formed. A new kind of distilled, new kind of emotion is formed, what Eliot variously calls the new art emotion or significant emotion that finds place in the works of art. So he believes in two kinds of impersonalities. The first, he says, is achieved by a great creative artist like Shakespeare, who matures as a whole man and in whom the development of his personality is as exciting in his youth as in old age. The second kind of impersonality is to be found in a lesser artist like W.B. Yeats, in whom there is a slow and continuous development of the personality, which is not so exciting in youth as in old age. Of these two types of impersonality, Eliot applauds the first, which according to him is, he says, more perfect. So now, this is what Eliot has to say in his essay. That is, the present is a continuation of the past and has germs of future in it. Writer belongs to the living stream of tradition, endeavors to enrich the stream through his individual contribution. That is, the tradition is like a living flowing stream, and every individual, he somehow enriches himself from the tradition available, and he in turn endeavors to enrich the stream through his contribution. So tradition should be constantly enriched by the individual talent, and on the other hand, individual should also constantly enrich itself through the overflowing stream of tradition. Then Eliot defines or differentiates emotions and feelings. What are emotions? Emotions are responses of the poet's mind to the external and internal stimuli, which furnish him with the most important raw materials that he transmutes imaginatively for the purposes of his art. That is, emotions are the experiences of the poet, the external and the internal experiences of the poet's mind, and these act as the raw materials which get transmuted into a work of art. Whereas feelings, they are responses of the poet's mind not to the external or internal stimuli, but to a work of art. That is, feelings are aroused in the poet's mind when he comes across a work of art. That is, when he reads the works of, or he comes across the works of other authors. So emotions have roots in the personal experiences of the poet, whereas feelings, they are occasioned by a mere study of literature. So briefly summing up as to what we have learnt about the impersonal theory of poetry. In this formulation of his theory of impersonality in art, Eliot speaks about the role of a great poet who transmutes his personal emotions or experiences into universally felt artistic experiences that have a universal appeal. For Eliot, the poet and the man are two separate and distinct beings with altogether distinctive and different roles. The notion of impersonality in art for him is, as he defines it, poetry is not a turning loose of emotion, but an escape from emotion. It is not the expression of personality, but an escape from personality. So, with this notion of his impersonality, or rather with this notion of impersonality, we need to look into The Wasteland. The relationship between Eliot's impersonal theory of poetry and poetic practice will become all the more apparent from his famous poem, or in his famous poem, The Wasteland. In this poem, Eliot gives expression to the predicament of contemporary men and women who have lost their moorings. It is rather the intensity with which the images, thoughts and ideas derived from different sources have been fused together, and they make the poem a great work of art. The poem begins with a description of the wasteland against the background of fertility myths, of the burial of the gods, and the atmosphere is one of the total death and destruction. So there is a total waste. The poet significantly focuses his attention on the character of Tiresias. Tiresias, who makes an impersonal and objective observation of contemporary tragedy. And what Tiresias sees, as Eliot himself explains, is the substance of the poem. So if we follow the progress of the poem, we find the poet continues in a cyclic manner, the progression from we to I and back to we. So it is because Eliot endeavors to strike a balance between fixity and flux, between his consciousness of being a distinct individual and at the same time a representative of humanity. And it is in their synthesis that the poem achieves a new meaning and significance. So till we meet again, thank you so much.